Inside your bedroom, we stopped counting the days, lost in the rhythm.
Hi, hello, welcome back to the video. This is gonna be kind of an informal Wednesday video, which is okay because we love those around here. I'm gonna start by getting a little bit more coffee first, and then we are going to talk all things Romantasy because I have written one and it will be released in October. So shameless plug right there. Curse of Wings and Darkness is a vampire romance. It is spicy, lots of spicy scenes in that book, and it is a romantasy, and it will be out October 1st, 2024, and I am very excited about it. So in the world of romance books, there are actually a lot of different genres, and I'm only going to go over like the fantasy related ones because I don't really write contemporary, which is another genre. Yet again, there are many genres of books. There's no wrong way to write a book, which is fun. So we're mostly going to talk about all things romantasy and related. First and foremost, what the heck even is romantasy? Because I didn't even fully understand that that was a genre and a thing until maybe like a year or two ago when I was heavily writing in that genre, and also as I was like doing my marketing and on Booktok a lot, and I learned a lot about those different subgenres from Booktok. So what is romantasy? My question when it comes to romantasy is, what is the difference between romantasy and fantasy romance? And honestly, after much Googling and reading and looking through comments on Booktok, not much. Basically, the difference between like romantic fantasy, fantasy romance, romantasy has to do with how prevalent is the romance in the book. So if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because when you're looking at those like genre titles next to each other, whichever word comes first or like the organization of the words, just an English grammar thing, can tell you a lot about what to expect from that book. Like if it's romantic fantasy, there's going to be more romance than fantasy. If it's fantasy romance, the fantasy is going to be the main plot and the romance might be like the subplot or like an underlying feel for the book. Romantasy, from my understanding, is a book where the romance is the main plot and the fantasy is the setting, or at least the setting is mostly where the fantasy elements come in. Romantasy and fantasy romance are kind of interchangeable, so you could say that they are the same category. It's just a combination of the two words. So you may hear that used interchangeably. You might even see it in like used interchangeably in book marketing. I think I do that quite often actually, but it's basically the same thing. It's just how prevalent the romance is in the story. I think a really good example is actually my books. So the Guardians of the Sixth Gate series, my young adult, is very much a fantasy romance. The fantasy elements come first. The overarching story has to do with the group trying to close the gate to the Shadowlands, which is in their community, to keep their community safe. And they do that using their each unique individual powers and their immortality to battle demons that come out of this, basically this gate. And that is the main plot. It is the fantasy plot of them trying to seal the gate for the greater good. So Guardians of the Sixth Gate is a fantasy romance. Curse of Wings and Darkness, which is my book coming out in October, is a romantasy or a romantic fantasy book, meaning the main plot of the book is the relationship. There is a fantasy subplot, which is introduced in this first book, but the main plot and the main storyline has to do with the love and the relationship that grows between these two people, and how that relationship changes them each as individuals and allows them to grow and flourish in ways that they did not know that they could. The fantasy is the underlying plot there that influences the romance. And that's the difference between those two books. One is more romance heavy, the other is more fantasy heavy. So that makes sense to me now when I put it in those kinds of terms. I want to talk more about like romantasy, especially because I find it fascinating, but also because there is like a gigantic subculture online that is like built around this romantasy idea, especially on Booktok. I took this screen recording of Booktok, specifically Romantasy Booktok, and I scrolled through just to kind of show you some of the top videos so you could get a vibe for what romantasy looks like specifically there. So a huge part of the Booktok community, especially when it comes to romantasy, you can see that they're all like rating the spice level, and they do that with that little chili emoji or like a fire emoji. That's a huge part of what people want from romantasy books. And some subgenres, especially, there are subgenres of romantasy. A big one being fae, thanks to Sarah J. Maas. That is still pretty popular. And there's been like a rise in dragons also, which you can kind of see some of these through here, thanks to Fourth Wing and Iron Flame with Rebecca Yarros. So there's even subgenres within romantasy. Vampires is another one. I have Curse of Wings and Darkness, which was a vampire romantasy book. And as you can see, there's Serpent and the Wings of Night, which is a vampire book. There are just a lot of different ways to showcase romantasy, but that's just the way Booktok specifically designs it and the way it looks there. I just think it's really interesting to look through what like the top trending videos are specifically to romance and romantasy and fantasy. So having that screen grab, I think, was really helpful. Booktok especially seems to set the standard for a lot of things in the book community, in the book world. That usually tends to be where all of the big trends start, and then they trickle to these other platforms. But there are also some trends and expectations in genre and books and writing that are different based on like the clientele. And I will say the clientele on Booktok tends to skew a tad younger. It also tends to skew a bit smuttier. So when you were looking through that, there were a lot of things highlighting like sex appeal and spiciness. And that is definitely something I'm writing into my own vampire romantasy, and that fits very much with the Booktok community, which makes a lot of sense because my content in promoting that book has done a little better on Booktok than it has on Instagram when it comes to romantasy book content. So it's interesting, the communities being just slightly different in that sense. But just for the sake of comparison, let's take a look at what's like romantasy looks like on Bookstagram, which would be Instagram. So just for comparison to see if some of the content is slightly different there, let's take a look at that also. So I pulled up Instagram and I used a hashtag specifically for romantasy Bookstagram, and it looks at first glance largely the same as Booktok. However, it feels a little like Booktok is more geared towards the vibes of the book and setting the tone, and Instagram seems to be more concerned with the actual content of the book. And what I mean by that is you're seeing a lot more screen grabs of like quotes and specific books, and especially reviews, even in reels. That seems to be kind of more common than just the vibe and the feel of the book like it is on Booktok. So if you're looking through right now, you can actually see there are a lot of photos of the specific books, specifically Fourth Wing and Everything Sarah J. Maas. And if you click on those posts, which I don't actually do in this video, you'll see that they're talking about annotating the book and what they liked about the book and the themes. So there's more discussion about the actual books, I think, on Bookstagram, whereas Booktok is concerned with like the overall vibes and the way that people feel about the books when they read them. Some of those comments are not at all meant to be like disparaging against the communities on Booktok versus Instagram. It's not even like a Booktok versus Instagram point that I'm trying to make, whether one's better than the other. I just think they're slightly different. And what I mean by like Booktok being more concerned about the feel of the book, I feel like on Booktok, there is a lot more of an indie community and a lot more of a celebration from a lot of the creators and the readers on Bookstagram about indie books specifically. And there's a lot less focus on whether or not a book is good, and a lot more of a focus on this book made me feel good. You know, there's a difference in the readers there, I think, to a degree. Booktok does not shame people for books or what they're reading. And I think with Booktok especially, a lot of that has to do with Booktok being so, especially the Romantasy community being so much more focused on like the spice level. I think that ties in a lot because there's no kink shaming. There's no shaming people for what they're reading. Largely, there is some of that, but I think as a whole, the community is not concerned on what makes a book good, and they're more concerned on like recommending books to people that are also going to enjoy the feel and the vibes of a specific book. Whereas Instagram, in the Romantasy community, they are looking at the books down to maybe a deeper level. I said that they're looking at the content of the book and what's actually going on in the plot and such. And so I think that the Romantasy genre is much more prevalent and maybe better represented on Booktok than Instagram. That's just my opinion and what I see just doing like a general sweep of both the platforms. So you tell me in the comments below if you think the same thing or if you have a different opinion. Personally, I like the Booktok community for Romantasy more than the Instagram one. And so that's just a personal note. I really appreciate the talk around like the smuttiness, honestly, and the spice level of the books because I am a sex positive person. And I think that some of the conversations we have, especially in the world of romance and then largely in the book community in general, I think that we don't do romance in the realm of like physical intimacy justice. I think we downplay it a lot, and it's dirty might be the right word for this. The way we talk about romance, especially on the whole, tends to be that we make the books out to be lesser than other books that don't contain romantasy. And I think that is a huge injustice. Romance is a part of life. Sex is a part of life. And why do we talk about it like it's this lesser dirty thing? I don't know. And I think it's really a shame that we do that. But Booktok does not do that. Booktok loves to talk about it all the time. And I just think that's great. It's a much healthier attitude towards sex in life, honestly. Not that there aren't some problematic things with the way Booktok does it occasionally, but I just really have an appreciation for how there's no shame around the discussion of romantasy, specifically on Booktok. Whereas Bookstagram, I think, could up its game in discussing some of those. And I wonder if it has in part to do with the policies and procedures about posting things on both of those platforms. It seems like on TikTok in general, you can get away with being a little spicier and on Instagram, you're more likely to get flagged for some of that same content. So that may have a huge part in why those communities are the way that they are, simply because Instagram does not allow some of that, whereas TikTok might allow that. So let's end our discussion for social media things there, and let's get back to the world of romantasy as like a subject. I said that like I have a whole lot more to add, and I really don't. Basically, romantasy, romantic fantasy, same thing. But it's just interesting, the community behind it all online and how these books have like really grown in popularity. Even though they've kind of always existed, I think the discourse around them is just different now, is really the biggest thing. Anyway, if you have anything to add, if you think I'm wrong and you wanted to like discuss further, or you have your own points to make, leave them in the comment section below. I'd love to hear them. Love to know what you think. What are your favorite romantasy books? Give me your suggestions down below, because I am going through my TBR and I need to add more to it. So let me know what you think. Check out the link in the description box below for all things Amy Prokopis books, my social media accounts, all of that fun stuff. Subscribe and like this video, and thank you so much for watching. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!
Oh my